Ladies and gentlemen, let's Red Gaming Telecom video. Let us discuss Titanfall, primarily with resolution in mind. The developers behind Titanfall, also known as Respawn, have said that the 1080 debate is unwinnable. And, indeed, the producer of the game, McCoy, said, and I quote, "It's the console wars. It's Sega does what Nintendo don't." And by the way, in case you're fairly young or you're not too familiar with that phrase, it was basically a phrase back in the 16-bit era, I believe it originated, and it was basically pointing out the Sega's marketing slogan, because they kind of used that to show like the speed of games, and a lot of the arcade games that Sega were porting at the time to like the Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive if you're in the Europe or European, shall I say, region. Anyway, he was saying this to GameSpot at PAX East, which of course was a few days ago, although the news has just kind of hit. And he also said there's going to be games that look better on one or the other. There's going to be exclusives that look better for whatever reason, and we never set out to engage the tech war. I feel that that's the war that no one actually wins. We consciously just decided that we're going to make a game that's fun and new and exciting, and then worry about making a good looking as we can. I don't think we made an ugly looking game, but no one in the office will tell you that we made the prettiest or the one that runs at the highest resolution. Now, in case you're not too familiar with the resolution of Titanfall, it's running at 792p, which is somewhat of a halfway house, of course, between the traditional 720p and 900p that a lot of games are starting to run in on this generation. Now, of course, that is being upscaled via the native or should I say via the hardware scaler inside the console. Nevertheless, we are seeing, of course, a lower resolution there. Now, in case you're wondering, it's running at 1408 by 792. So 1408, of course, would be the horizontal width of the resolution, and 792, of course, would be the height, just for clarification. Anyway, continuing, we have more that we can do. We're looking at performance stuff on the Xbox One. The PC patch added some stuff from working with NVIDIA for some things on the PC. At the end of the day, we don't really care. People were roasting us because we run at higher resolution than 720p, but we're not locked at a solid 60 FPS yet. And it's like, yeah, well, you know what? Guess what? The GPU isn't always a thing that limits your frame rate and your performance. So we hit the highest resolution we could without limiting the GPU. So in that case, they pretty much did the best they could do. Now remember, we're also going to be seeing a DLC popping up soon, which is known as Expedition. There's going to be new multiplayer maps and a few other bits and shiny pieces for that, and that's going to be released on the Xbox One and PC. Of course, Titanfall itself was released mid last month and was one of the heavy hitters for the Xbox One. So what are my thoughts on this? Because it's a bit of a complicated decision. The thing is, developers are trying to optimize the system the best they can. And interestingly enough, I was doing a little bit of Googling because I don't personally play Titanfall. Dave, also known as the boss on the channel, he or should I say big boss on the channel, he plays a lot of Metal Gear Solid, hence the name, and he plays a lot of it on the Xbox One, and we've actually just gotten his Xbox One fixed. It kind of blew after a power surge, which was unfortunate, so he's going to be doing more Titanfall and Xbox One stuff for us in the next few days, hence the reason there's not been much. But on the PC at least, obviously a variety of different graphics cards run the title. Now, interestingly enough, NVIDIA, for some reason or another, seem to do slightly better at Titanfall. It might be based on the source engine, as it turns out, which is pretty much the engine that Titanfall utilizes. It's an updated engine, but source is fairly old now. Primarily it's CPU based, but obviously the developers have used quite a bit, and there are quite a few benchmarks available on if you Google around, but primarily if you were to turn everything up the highest setting, 8 times MSAA, double buffering, max FOV, field of view, maxing out anisotropic filtering, all the other graphics options, you could start seeing that even a fairly cheap graphics card like, say, AMD's 270X or 260X or NVIDIA's GTX 760, I'm sorry, you know, they're always hitting a fairly reasonable frame rate. I mean, they're averaging like 80 for their 760. The 260 from AMD, meanwhile, is hitting like 66. The 650 Ti boost, on the other hand, is hitting 51. Now, obviously, a lot of this is going to be dependent and not mentioning minimum frames per second, because minimum obviously is when things get really, really busy. So, for example, the GTX 760, which has got 2 GB of RAM, that's the version that they tested on Game Nexus, that actually dips by, well, over half. It actually hits to about 30.5, which is quite the dip. So obviously there are still optimization improvements they need to do regarding this. So on the Xbox One, it can sometimes get a little bit busy, primarily in the middle of a lot of firefights, and obviously some gamers have stated, well, you know what, we'd kind of preferred if you guys would have lowered the internal rendered resolution and instead focused on frame rate. As after all, you're dealing with about 20% extra pixels to render between those resolutions. By the way, to calculate that, all I'm doing is simply timesing the horizontal and the vertical resolutions, and then you take the larger number. So in this case, it would obviously be 1408 by 792, and then you simply divide that by the resolution of the smaller number. So in this case, that would be like 1280 by 720. So assuming that they wanted the target resolution of 720p. However, the developers Respawn are stating, of course, that they are trying to work not only in improving the resolution, but they also want to make the frame rate a little bit more stable on the X1. Anyway, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.